So, and now the last talk in this session before the break is from Alessio Molinari from STRG. So, welcome.
Does it work? Yes. Okay, now it does. Hello everyone. So this is going to be a pretty simple presentation about a Python library. It's a fully open source library for tracking your experiments. And in case you're interested, you can find the source code here on GitHub. Now let's see if I can change slides. How does this work? Okay, that's cool. So a few words about me. So originally I'm from Rome, from Italy. Then I moved to Pisa, still in Italy, and I got a master's degree. And then later I got a PhD, which I guess you can tell from the fact that these slides are written in LaTeX, which is like a pain you self-inflict yourself only after academia, you know. And then now I work in Vienna at STRG, and I am a Linux and open source enthusiast. I mean, I just really like Linux operating systems and the open source in general. I have several open source contributions. It's not something I've been doing forever, but I've been contributing more regularly to open source software in the past 2 years, I would say. And what I mean by regularly is that, for instance, I worked quite a bit with the Hyperland compositor, which you might think of it as a desktop environment, let's say. And what I mean by regularly contributing to it is that if I find a problem with the software or something that I don't like, I don't open an issue, I don't complain about it, I just try to fix it myself and open a PR. And I also have my own plugin for this. Then I have a lot of other contributions, really don't remember all of them anymore. Some of them are accepted, some of them are still waiting for review. I have one in Telegram that is still waiting, and it's been there since 2020. It's a huge thread at the moment, I don't know why. So why did I build a code tracking library? The thing is that during my PhD, while working on my research, I was running a lot of experiments, and the code and the results that I was getting, it was really easily lost. And Git is not really a solution because we don't really commit every time we change a hyperparameter. And some solutions were available now. I mean, we're talking around 2 years ago, but they were either overly complicated, they required maybe a cloud subscription or this kind of stuff. And I wanted something that was truly open source, meaning that you can actually contribute to it, because it sounds weird, but there are open source projects where if you open a PR, nobody's going to look at it, and you won't be able to merge it. And also, I wanted to be simple, following the keep it simple, stupid philosophy. And what this meant is that this library should be a simple software in the sense that there are no unnecessary architectures. It shouldn't be overly engineered, and there should be as less as possible between you and what the library is doing. Even if this means that in the end the user has to write their own little scripts around it, I think this is fine as long as there is a straightforward way to do it, and you don't have to write another library to interface with my library. But so, what is it exactly? It's again a Python library which keeps a local database of your experiments, and you can record names, descriptions, metrics, save pickles, files, whatever. And it keeps local snapshot of the code that generated those experiments, and it is fully open source, fully offline, terminal-centric, meaning that you should be able, and you are able, to operate this library from a terminal and from SSH. So that was the goal. And the snapshots are created by hard linking all files that did not change between your different runs, and we only copy the files that change. And this is done, of course, because I don't know if this happens to you, but it happened to me quite often, that there was that one day that I was really determined to get my model working, and I was changing a lot of stuff, changing a lot of layers, running, stopping, running again. Every time we do this, we create an entry in the TMT database, and of course, I didn't want my hard drive to explode. So this is why it was implemented this way. And the local database is actually just a bunch of JSON files in the .tmt folder at the root of your repository or wherever you run your experiments from. And the reason why this was done is, again, to keep it simple. These are JSON files. You don't need my library. Once you have run the experiments using my library, then you don't need my library anymore. These are JSON files. If you want, you can write your own scripts around it. So if the library goes unmaintained, you still have access to this data. There are not thousands or, like, I don't know, more lines of code that are wrapping, let's say, the way you can retrieve your data. And so how does this work? It's really simple. It's just like you import a decorator, and then you decorate your function. You can give a name or several other parameters. And the function that you decorate as only one requirement, it either returns none or returns a dictionary. And this dictionary should have metrics names as keys and floating point values. And this was done just because then the library can know and can show you metrics of your experiments. And just to remind you that you can also use the decorator this way in Python, and I actually usually do it this way because if you do it like this, then you can write maybe a command line interface, and then you can pass externally the name or the description or all the parameters from outside, and then I find it easier, let's say. This is definitely not the next slide. Okay. So how do you then search and load for your experiments? So basically back then, 2 years ago, I built a terminal user interface. I don't know why I did it. It sounded cool and it looked cool. Maybe like a normal command line interface would have been much better, but this is what we have. But it allows you to write a regex up there, and then you get all of your experiments. Then you can select one, really old school, and then you get all the information about your experiments. You can, if you install the proper optional libraries, you can also copy paste it to your clipboard. So that's cool. And then you get all the information you want, and then you can load it into your code. TMT exposes this TMT manager class. Then you set the ID of your experiment. This is where things are getting weird, yes. But all of the other things are pretty easy. Like for instance, here you can see the results paths that are given to you by the library. So again, it's for keeping it simple. There's nothing more than that between you and what is happening under the hood, You're just loading a bunch of pickles. And if you want, you can also load or save files in a more complicated manner. If you want, you can pass your own saving and loading functions. And the second example is doing basically the same thing, is abstracting it away a little bit, and then it's loading it in a pandas data frame. And finally, the get metrics thing is why I needed a dictionary when you decorate your function. If you need to do more complicated stuff, you can access the underlying database, and then I expose some more utility functions. But again, in the end, this is just a JSON database. So you can even open it in your text editor and see where the stuff are, and okay, so this library has flaws, like everything, but it works, and I've been using it regularly for the past 2 years, and we are still using it today in STRG in some of our projects. However, since I finished my PhD, I haven't really been running that many experiments. I've been caught up in a lot of other open source projects, also been living my life, not on a computer, let's say. But so I haven't really been working too much. on it for a while. And this is why I'm calling for contributions. There are many things that could be implemented here. Like the terminal user interface is really cool. Maybe a command line interface might be more practical. Also accessing experiments, it was a little weird. Like you need to remember the ID, you need to copy paste it basically. Maybe we could have a more straightforward way of doing this. Like in practice, I found that it works pretty okay because usually you're interested in a few experiments and then you can keep track of them, load them, do whatever you need to do with them. Probably there are more things that you might want to do with this library or that you might want to implement in the library, or I mean, I would like to implement. And I think that contributing to open source is a really cool thing that is not done enough, in my opinion, at least for my experience in research. But I think it's cool. You make the software that you use your own. You get internet points, which is always cool. You get resume points, and yeah, you get to deal with strangers. Like they ask you all kind of weird things. But I mean, and TMT is a really small project, so it might be a good place to start contributing. I think it's a really cool thing that we have in software in general. And I feel that sometimes this can be scary. I mean, this is how I felt, because we are kind of attached sometimes to our code, and we think it's not good enough or it will be judged harshly. But in the end, we all write bad code, and I don't think that somebody that writes bad code is a bad programmer. Not necessarily. I mean, unless you do it every time. But like often, you're not a bad programmer if you write bad code. So that's okay. And this is it. Yes. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for the presentation. So are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong. It is possible for me to share my experiments with someone else?
Yeah. You just share a folder and then you share everything with somebody else.
Like I simply copy the folder and give to someone else?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
And you're welcome.
So you mentioned that Git is bad for this kind of tracking because you need to commit every time. Can you explain me why you don't need to commit in your solution? Let's say you have the decorator, you give it a name. I guess you put the version number in your name of the experiment. So how does it keep track of the code? Let's say now I have the decorator, I make an experiment, I change the code and run it again with another experimental name. Would it track the code change without committing then in your database?
Yes, it would, because basically by decorating the function, there are not many, but a few more things to this library that, of course, I haven't explained in this small talk. But basically, there are also, let's say, like child experiments. So every experiment can have child experiment, which means that if you keep running experiments, changing something, not changing names, not changing descriptions, not changing anything, I will just save this new experiment as a child of the experiment that was run with the same name and description that you ran like previously. So you can do that, or you could do this, which is something that I usually do. Every time you change something, you run the code and you pass from the command line the new name or the new description that you want. And every time your code runs, the decorator will take care of taking a snapshot of the new code, and you will find it in the .tmt folder. And it will take care of saving the metrics and whatever else the library can do, it will do it. And you can also set it, for instance, that it will save your stuff and take snapshots even if there is an exception. Like, namely, if you like Control-C your experiment, then you will throw an exception. You can set it so that the library will just catch the exception and still save everything. Sometimes you don't want that, sometimes you do, so you can configure it this way, yeah.
So you can also restore the experiment. Let's say you didn't commit, but you have it in your database, so there's a way just like like restoring the snapshot in my folder to look at it as.
Yes, you will get like in the .tmt folder, you will get as many snapshots as experiments you have, and they will have the same name as the ID of the experiment, so you can look at the code, but by writing a little script or something. As long as you have the ID, you can retrieve the code that generated the results. Yes.
Okay. I have used DFC a bit, and I was quite annoyed of the committing. So it looks like sounds like a very nice project. So I'm looking forward to using it.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you again, and yeah, also for you a little present. Thank you for being here. We will now have the next break, and the next.